Hey everyone, we are now on chapter 9. In chapter 8, it was a pretty short chapter. They were all having dinner together with Dr. Lee, and Marty was trying to convince Wolf to take him and Grace to the Congo with him. Remember, they're going to the Congo to try to warn one of the tribe members there about Noah Blackwood possibly coming there and wreaking havoc. So they want to go and make sure that he's safe, and Marty really wants to go. All that really happened in the last chapter is that we learned how the gizmo worked. So Wolf was showing Marty how to send an email and was explaining how anything you save in the gizmo is saved basically to the internet. And even if your gizmo is lost or destroyed, all the information you saved on it is not. So basically, it's a smartphone that has a Google Drive. All right. Chapter 9, Lost Lake. I wonder if this chapter is going to be about Lake Tele, which I think is where they got where Dr. Lee got the egg from. Quark, 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 run! Bigfoot was chasing Marty through a dream. He snapped his eyes open, relieved to find himself safe in bed in his new room and not in the soiled hands of a giant primate. Grace and her stories, he grumbled. After dinner, they had gone back to the library where Grace had read him cryptid horror stories until after midnight in an attempt to get him to give up the Congo idea. It hadn't worked. Today I will get Wolf to agree to take us to the Congo, he declared, swinging his feet out of bed. Cork, cork, cork. What is that? He looked across the room through the sliding glass door and saw a raven perched on the balcony wall. He walked over for a closer look, tripping over his suitcase on the way and bumping his head on the glass. Ouch! The raven flew off. After a quick shower, he opened his bag and found his favorite pair of faded jeans, the ones with the left knee blown out by a nasty fall he had taken while climbing in the Alps. He pulled on the pants along with a t-shirt and sneakers, and topped the ensemble off with a baseball cap that looked as though it had been kicked halfway around the world, which it nearly had, if you counted the various outdoor camps he had attended during his summer breaks. He stepped out onto the balcony and took in a deep breath of crisp Pacific Ocean air. His room was on the east side of the house, and there was an excellent view of the island. It was much clearer than it had been when they arrived, and he could see that the two lakes he had seen on the Gizmo the day before. Just past the second lake were two huge metal quinset huts, big enough to house several blimps. What could Wolf be storing in those? Marty wondered about. Aloud, he carried the Gizmo downstairs and found Grace asleep on the sofa in the library. Her moleskin and Frankenstein monkey lay across her stomach, and on the floor were dozens of books. He shook her awake. Grace squinted irritably up at him. What time is it? After dawn, Marty said. Too early, Grace complained. She'd only been asleep a couple of hours, having spent the night reading about cryptids and thinking about what Laurel had told her about overcoming fear. To top everything off, when she finally fell asleep, she'd had the nightmare again, which was her biggest fear. How do you overcome something you can't even remember? Let's do some exploring, Marty said. We need to wait for Wolf. I checked him on the Gizmo, Marty said. He's up in the wolf den, probably working. I don't want to bother him. Since when has bothering someone bothered you? Let's go, Marty said. He told us to stay in the house, Grace said sleepily. I'm not going anywhere. His exact words, Marty pointed out, were, I don't want you getting lost. I'm not going to get lost. We won't go very far. The island's not that big. Marty, we don't know what he has on the island. You mean Bigfoot? Marty made a monster face. Idiot. Have you thought more about going to the Congo? Yes. And I'm going back to sleep. Grace rolled over and closed her eyes. Marty ran down the long hill, escorted by the quirking raven. He was annoyed with Grace. How could she pass up an opportunity to search for a living dinosaur, for crying out loud? How could she take the opportunity away from him? Why does she have to be afraid of everything? I don't think being afraid of a dinosaur is weird. And I think he's crazy for wanting to go search for this dinosaur in the Congo. I think that sounds miserable. But by the time he reached the bottom of the hill, with the warm air tickling his skin through the tear on his tear on his pant leg, and the wonderful sensation of dampness beginning to build in the sweatband of his favorite cap, his bad feelings were gone. He'd never been mad at anyone for more than 5 minutes in his life. This beats school any day, he thought. An island all to myself. I wonder if there are fish in the lake. I wonder if Phil will teach me how to fly. I wonder. He heard a rustling noise in the trees off to the side of the road. He stopped and listened. The sound stopped. It must have been a squirrel or a deer, he thought, and continued running down the road. But 100 yards later, he heard the rustling again and slowed down. Maybe I should go back up to the house, he thought. Don't be ridiculous. I've seen polar bears in the Arctic, rattlesnakes in the desert, and giant moray eels in the Red Sea. He continued on, thinking about the Congo and the cryptids, and the rustling sound came again. I don't know about you guys, but I am ready to see or come into contact with a cryptid. I'm getting bored with this book if we don't get to the cryptids. This time it was in front of him. A few seconds later, he heard the sound behind him. He whipped around, but saw nothing. It was a loud skittering noise. Okay, let's guess what cryptid this is that he's about to run into. I'm going to guess it's the chupacabra. I don't know. As if the animal making it were quick and extremely agile. Okay, so now I do think it is the chupacabra. He began to regret not waiting for a wolf, as Grace had suggested, and was still nervous when he reached the lake. Quark, quark, quark. The raven circled above the water. The first thing that struck Marty about the lake was its size. It seemed much bigger than it had from the balcony. The other thing that surprised him was that it appeared to be man-made. There was a concrete retaining wall all the way around the perimeter. He leaned over the edge to see how the water was, thinking he might go for a swim. Ooh, I bet there's a cryptid. Ooh, I bet there's a Loch Ness monster in the lake. What do you guys think? That would be cool. Whoa, not without a wetsuit. He shook the cold water off his hands, and a few drops hit his lip. Salt. Okay, it's salt water, so there must be an animal in there. He leaned down again and dipped his finger into the water and tasted it. What's a saltwater lake doing in the middle of an island? He didn't have time to answer his own question because a horrendous howl erupted behind him. He twisted around and saw a very large, hairy creature charging out of the forest. Oh my God, it's Bigfoot. Bigfoot! Marty dove into the icy water of the lake and swam for his life. With each terrified stroke, he berated himself for not listening to his sister and prayed that Bigfoot could not swim. He didn't stop until he got to the center of the lake, breathing hard. He looked back through salt-stung eyes, relieved beyond belief to see that the creature was still on the shore, hooting and howling, tearing up bushes and tossing them into the lake. He treaded water and tried to catch his breath. His teeth chattered with fear and cold. He knew that if he didn't get out of the cold water soon, hypothermia would set in and Bigfoot would be the least of his problems. But he was wrong about this. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught a swift movement to his right and another movement to his left. A moment later, 3 large fingers broke the surface and sliced towards him with deadly speed. "Sharks!" he yelled. "Sharks!" But the only things that seemed to hear him were the creature raging along the shore and the raven circling above his head. I wonder if the raven is video recording him. I bet this raven is the one that has a video camera attached to its leg or something and is recording what's happening on the island. That's my guess. All right, Grace felt something cold and clammy nuzzle her face. Reluctantly, she opened her eyes and found Petey climbing on Monkey. "No," she moaned. She picked the little dog up, put her on the floor, and saw Wolf sitting in the chair opposite the sofa. His head was turned away, and he was wiping his eyes as if he had been crying. When he turned back toward her, she saw that he had trimmed his beard and combed his hair and looked a lot more presentable than he had the day before. Grace put Monkey behind her. She knew she was too old to be sleeping with a stuffed animal, but she couldn't help herself. "Good morning," he said. "I see you've been doing some reading." Grace nodded, still wondering if he had actually been crying, and if so, why. He picked up one of the books. "You've made some interesting selections." "Yes, Grace glanced over to the side of his chair and saw a pair of well-used aluminum crutches. She wondered who they belonged to, then gasped in surprise. The right leg of Wolf's pants was pinned up just below the left knee. What the heck? Wolf lost his leg randomly? He followed her gaze. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I should have warned you. I guess I'm just used to it being gone. I don't think about it anymore. I usually wear a prosthesis, an artificial leg. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." Oh, okay, so he didn't have a leg to start. Grace knew what a prosthesis was. A prosthesis, by the way, is a fake leg. And she was not uncomfortable about his missing leg, just surprised and deeply embarrassed by her reaction to it. "Some doctor I'll make," she thought. "I was going to put it on before I came down," her uncle continued, becoming more flustered with every word, but Grace sat up. "Stump?" she said, trying to redeem herself. Yes, Wolf looked relieved. The stump was sore from my trip, and I thought I should give it a rest. Of course, Grace said. How did you lose it? Wolf stared at her for a long time as if he were debating with himself. It's a long story, he finally replied. If it's all right with you, I'd like to tell you another time. Grace nodded, though she was dying of curiosity. Wolf pointed at the books. I know this is all a little hard to grasp, he said, and believe me, I would have preferred to ease into the subject of cryptozoology with you and Marty, instead of leaving you to discover it the way you did. You probably think I'm a lunatic. Marty doesn't, Grace said. Wolf gave her a gentle smile. And what's your opinion? Grace did not really want to give him her opinion, so she took a page out of Marty's book. She changed the subject. I'd like to clear something up that happened yesterday. Yes, I was hiding on the balcony when you had your conversation with Laurel. That's how I heard about Mokalamembe, Noah Blackwood, Masalito. Okay, so Masalito is the name of the guy who gave her the egg, and he lives on Lake Tele or near Lake Tele, I think. The Congo and all of it. I told Marty what I overheard. Laurel had nothing to do with it. I'm sorry I eavesdropped on you. I admire your honesty, Wolf said. I also admire Marty and Laurel's covering for you. And just so you know, at your age, I would have hidden on the balcony too. It's fun to listen to grown-ups when they don't know you're there. Grace smiled. Her uncle might be a lunatic, but he was a nice lunatic. I have a lot to explain, he said. Where's Marty? He went for a walk. A look of concern crossed Wolf's face. He took his gizmo out and flipped it open. Is there something the matter? Probably not, but he should have waited for me to show him around. He booted up the program and clicked Marty's name. Oh my God, we've got to get down to the lake. He grabbed his crutches and pulled himself up. What's going on? Marty's drowning. Grace was amazed at his dexterity and speed. She and Petey could barely keep up with him as he rushed through the front door and down the steps to the Humvee. Marty was on the verge of blacking out. The sharks had attacked him several times, but surprisingly, he felt no pain. He thought the cold water had numbed his mangled legs. Oh my God. Seriously? And he was grateful for that. This did not explain the lack of frothing blood in the churning water, but his hypothermic mind was not clear enough to grasp this. He closed his eyes and simply waited for the end, feeling sad about all the people and things he would miss. Something wrapped itself around his neck and began to pull him. He thought it was probably the tentacle of a giant squid. It must have outgrown the aquarium in the library. He did not struggle. No point to that now, he thought hazily. Grace and Wolf arrived just as Laurel was hauling Marty out of the water. Grace leaped from the Humvee before it came to a complete stop and ran over to him. His eyes were closed and his skin was a sickly pale blue. First Mom and Dad, and now Marty, she thought. What will happen to me? Laurel flipped him over on his stomach and began pushing on his back to expel water from his lungs. Is he dead? Far from it, Laurel answered breathlessly, just a little waterlogged. I was on my way to meet Phil at the hangar, and I heard someone shouting something about sharks. Wolf joined them. Did you say sharks? That's what I thought I heard. Laurel started massaging his limbs. We need to get him warmed up. Wolf looked at Grace. There's a blanket and a first aid kit in the Humvee. Grace ran back to the Humvee with Petey behind her. She opened up the back end and found the blanket and kit. As she grabbed them and turned to leave, she found herself face to face with the most hideous creature she had ever seen. Before she could scream, the creature scooped Petey off the ground and ran back into the forest, shrieking in victory. Don't faint, she told herself. Marty needs you. Don't faint. But it was too much for her. Her knees buckled and she collapsed onto the ground. She came to a few minutes later with Laurel bent over her. Are you all right? Grace didn't answer. She grabbed the blanket and ran back over to Marty, who had his head in Wolf's lap. He grinned when he saw her. Grace had never been more happy in her life. She got down on her knees and started tucking the blanket around him. Laurel came up behind her with the first aid kit. Did you see the Bigfoot? He asked Grace through chattering teeth. It attacked me. Wolf and Laurel looked at him as if he were delirious. I saw it, Grace glared at Wolf accusingly. It just snatched up Petey and carried her off into the woods. It was awful. And the sharks, Marty tried to sit up, but Wolf wouldn't let him. Are both my legs gone? Your legs are just fine, Wolf answered. There are no sharks in the lake. He looked at Grace. And there is no Bigfoot, at least not on Kryptos. Oh, that's lame. And Petey is safe. Then where is she? Grace demanded. I'll show you. Wolf took a silent dog whistle from his pocket and blew it. A moment later, the hideous creature burst out of the forest and ran down to them. It's a chimp, Marty said, although with all the twigs and leaves clinging to its fur, it was difficult to tell exactly what kind of primate it was. Grace was too stunned to speak. The chimpanzee was holding Petey in the crook of its arm, and the little dog seemed as content as she had the day before when Laurel was holding her. Her name's Bo. Wolf pulled a handful of peanuts out of his pocket. Bo gently set Petey on the ground and took them from him. And it looks like she's wearing more of her nest this morning than she left up there in the tree. He started picking the debris out of her fur. She's a bonobo chimpanzee from the Congo. During his near-death experience, Marty had completely forgotten about the Congo. Wolf tried to stop him, but Marty brushed his hand away and sat up. In an attempt to repair some of the damage he had done to his cause, he cleared his throat and said, "The bonobo was discovered in the Congo in 1929. Before that time, scientists thought there was only one species of chimpanzee. The bonobo can be distinguished from the common chimpanzee by its longer limbs and the black pigment on its face." Wolf stared at him, clearly impressed. Grace had seen this carnival act before. Marty had a photographic memory. The problem was there was only a few things that interested him enough to take a picture of with his mind. Recipes, animal trivia, survival tips, and whole comic book plots were the things he most commonly memorized. "Where'd you learn that?" Wolf asked. "Oh, I don't know," Marty said. Actually, he knew exactly where he had gotten the information. He had lifted the bonobo quote directly from a Noah Blackwood animal video. He and Luther had watched the video half a dozen times. "I've always been fascinated with the animals of the Congo. I've made quite a study of them over the years." Wolf looked a little skeptical, and Marty thought it wise to change the subject for the moment. Shakily, he got to his feet. "If those weren't sharks in the lake, what were they?" Wolf handed him one of his crutches. "I don't need a crutch," Marty said, then noticed Wolf's empty pant leg. "The crutch isn't for you to walk with," Wolf said. "I want you to take it down to the water and slap it on the surface twice." Marty continued to stare at the pant leg. "It wasn't sharks," Wolf assured him, pulling himself up with the other crutch. "Go ahead and slap the water. You have my word that nothing will come out and bite your leg off." Marty slapped the crutch on the water. At first, nothing happened. The water was as smooth as glass. Then suddenly, 3 large animals broke the surface in unison, rising at least 20 feet in the air before splashing back down into the depths. "Geez, they're bottlenose dolphins," Marty said with a mixture of wonder and embarrassment. Bo threw her remaining peanuts away and began running up and down the shore, hooting at them. "I can't believe I mistook them for sharks." He gave the crutch back to his uncle. "Actually, dolphins are pretty dangerous also." "Bo isn't fond of dolphins," Wolf explained. "They're constantly teasing her. I suspect that she saw you near the shore, thought you were a dolphin lover, and decided to have a little fun. Your brain probably short-circuited when you saw her, and the stuff sticking to her didn't help. You aren't the first person to mistake a great ape for Bigfoot." "That must be what happened," Marty eagerly agreed. "I didn't get a very good look at her before I jumped into the water. Even Grace thought Bo was Bigfoot, and she didn't even believe in cryptids. So why do you have these animals?" "We use them as scouts." Wolf took his gizmo out and was about to turn it on, then hesitated. "Maybe we should do this some other time." "I'm fine," Marty said. "Tell us about the scouts." "All right," Wolf said. "But then you're going to the house to get into some dry clothes." He clicked the video icon, and an aerial scene of Lost Lake appeared on the tiny screen. Standing on the shore were 4 humans, a tiny dog, and an angry bonobo. "This is live?" Marty looked up, trying to figure out where the camera was. "Compliments of vid," Wolf said. "Our eye in the sky. I knew it. I was right about the raven." "Your satellite?" "No," Wolf said, pointing at the black bird circling above them. "Vid is a raven, short for video. He wears a lightweight harness with a built-in miniature camera. We saw him fly out of the house when we got there," Grace said. "I replaced the camera battery yesterday afternoon just before you arrived," Wolf explained. "He must have given you a scare." "Nah," Marty said. "It takes a lot more than that to scare us. The raven is in the corvid of crow family. If I'm not mistaken, its scientific name is Corvus corax." Grace rolled her eyes. "You're not mistaken," Wolf said. "Vid was flying over the lake when you were having your little problem. I saw Laurel jump in the water and swim out to you." "A bird's eye view," Marty said. "With Vid, that's exactly right. And with the dolphins, we're able to see underwater. Bo climbs trees and helps us see what's going on in the canopy. So we have VidCam, BoCam, Dolphin Cam, and others. We even have a camera for PD, although we rarely use it because she sticks so close to us. Poodle Cam, Marty said, glancing at Bo, who was still lambasting the dolphins. Bo's not wearing a tracking tag, he said, but we saw her marker on the gizmo yesterday. She would just tear a tag off. We use subcutaneous implant transmitters just beneath the skin of all the animal scouts except for PD. Hers is on her collar. How do you control where they go? Other than calling them to me with the whistle, I can't. And I don't want to control them. Every animal species has its own way of looking at things. You can learn a lot by seeing the world from their perspective. We'll be taking Vid and Bo to the Congo to help us keep an eye on things. What about Grace and me? Marty asked. Wolf looked terribly uncomfortable. We'll talk about that up at the house after you get into some dry clothes. He turned to Laurel. Did you know those were dolphins when you jumped in after Marty? No, she said, but to be honest, I didn't think there were sharks in there either. I see. Well, I'm indebted to you for pulling Marty out of the water. Me too, Marty said, giving her a wet hug. That was a pretty exciting chapter, but I'm disappointed that they weren't actually cryptids. I want to see some cryptids. All right, guys, until next time. Bye.